Howdy, y'all. GooseFathr here. Today, I'm really proud to give you this video that is 6 tips that we learned from the longest game in the history of the Bazaar. If you check our YouTube channel, you will see a 5-hour monster video of a game where we and chat sat down and rethought every single thing that we think we knew on Pyg. We came up with some great lines that we hadn't before. We rethought a lot of assumptions and found some new lessons. And I wanted to distill those in this video and share them with you so that you didn't have to waste 5 hours of your life on that monstrosity. So let's jump in and see the things that we learned. First and foremost is that we started rethinking how we use metascalers in the game. So obviously metascalers work as banks. You can grab them, you can just kind of keep doing the things you're doing in order to cycle power into the items, selling off coins for your money tree, buying and selling weapons for your gym. And then you have the value that you put in those things to sell later. Obviously, there's some secondary effects to some of those. Gym, you get hit points. Kiosks, you actually get an item that maybe has some burn damage that you can run for a little bit of time. But most of the time, they're thought of as just things that we're using as a bank or things that we're using as a long-term hedge. In actuality, I think the best way to think of them is climbing anchors. They're things that stabilize our current position. They give us power and ability to lean for new lines. And then from there, we can either throw them away or utilize themselves in order to move up into a more powerful board state. So with that metaphor in mind, there's kind of a life cycle to utilizing these meta items. The first is to secure your position. You bought the money tree. You now want to invest a little bit in it in order to get the value of it up and then start giving yourself a little bit of time for it to start giving you coins, paying itself back, and starting to fund your board, starting to give you some security and some ability to build yourself into a stronger board state. Then you want to scout your path forward. You want to start looking for what the next leap is, what the next direction is that this particular line gives you. For a money tree, it's kind of obvious. It gives you a lot of money that you can sell off to buy any particular, good, powerful thing that you see. But for something like a gym, it's actually setting you up not only to have some income, but it's building a bunch of hit points that might allow you to utilize hit point based builds, or move yourself into Fat Pig or something later on, or just give you so much tempo by being so much beefier than your enemy that you just have a lot stronger of a time in a weapons board or a face rush board, so that you can move into that a little bit more aggressively. Then once you've kind of figured out that there's a place in front of you that you can move that's going to give you power, this is the hard part. It's unhooking and leaping. It's taking the item, throwing it in the trash, and moving on. In this instance that we're looking at right here, we got ourselves a money tree. It paid for itself a few times over and gave us quite a few coins that we utilized to buy ourselves into the board that we were in, also to buy ourselves a pig's gym. But we suddenly came to the point where we had a Lumbors on the other side of the board that we wanted, and we really wanted to start investing in our weapon cycling and building up our hit point pool by that. And so while we can get more value out of tree, it's no longer taking us forward into the next line. That's the moment when you know that you have to get rid of it. Once you get rid of your anchor, it's time to stabilize your position. So buy up the couple of items that you decided to get rid of it for. Maybe shop and look for a couple supplementary items until you have enough things to build together a powerful board state. And then you're going to start establishing a new anchor. You're going to start looking around to see if you can't find another item like money tree, item like pawn shop, to be able to start catching value, stabilizing your next position, give you the ability to move forward into the next board state. I mean, the easy answer to this question is that it can actually improve the current power of your board. And to be honest with you, this is kind of the only answer to this question. In this current example that we're looking at, we weren't really building gym in order to be able to run gym as our backup plan. We had a lot of other things that we were hoping to find, but gym just got up to the point just by trying to cycle and build up hit points that moving it onto our board and getting rid of a couple of the weapons was actually giving us a one-shot ability around the 9-second mark. And it just became too strong to not run on the board. That's the best time, and the best way to know that an item is ready is that it's actually just increasing the power of your current board state. You're running a pawn shop alongside your silk. Suddenly you've gotten it to the amount of power level that it's actually going to delay the amount of time it takes them to kill you. So silk's able to come online and have a little bit of time to be utilized. Then that's the time for pawn shop to go on your board. The second time, and I really, really hesitate to even mention this because I think we do this too often when we shouldn't. But the second time is when your board is beyond losing. You're kind of in a Hail Mary position and you need to start hard fishing for some other items, for some other play in order to get back out of the losing state that you're in. We're going to talk a lot about other ways to invest to not do this kind of full leap into a completely different build. But in the instance in which that is the case, I would still strongly urge you to make sure that you're paying attention. Like, you're not just disgusted with your board state, you're not just unhappy with your board state, but your board state is actually not winning. And that you actually are gaining power by moving out of your board state into the thing that you grab. So you actually are able to buy these couple of hedges, make space in your stash to pull these things down, and they are legitimately setting you up for a likely play line, even if it's not online yet, but it is definitely a line that will come online. I wouldn't do it for items that you're still fishing for, like your whammy or something that's going to actually be your win condition. Only when you are absolutely desperate and when it is gaining you power should you move those items to your board and get rid of things that you're running on a existing winning board state. In the meantime, in between utilizing your metascalers as kind of anchors and then throwing them away and going for the next one, it's important to look for income plays as small gap fillers. This is how you're going to like slightly stabilize, is you get something that'll last you a much longer piece of time. Little things like grabbing your crystal bonsai in the first 2 hours of the day and running it on your PvE board, grabbing VIP pass if you have a property or two, or if you could grab it with a fast property just for a couple of PvE plays so you can get some value out of it. Your Pig's Dagger is actually really good, like secondary catch once you've gotten rid of your pawn shop if you needed it for income or something like that on a cycling board. All of those things, just little bits to always keep your eye out to see if you can make a little bit more money along the way to like keep buying power as you go and still have the money available to grab the next anchor. In the middle of the board here, though, is Boomerang, because Boomerang deserves a special place in my heart. It is so much stronger than I gave it credit for. There are so many games where I didn't want to run Boomerang because of how often I forget to put it on my PvE board, and that it's just frustrating to realize that misplay. But the amount of value, income, and power you get from this soft play is unreal. I actually shouldn't have it here. It should be on its own board, but in the interest of time, I put these things together. But Boomerang is almost a must play. It is so much more powerful than any of us give it credit for. So getting into your board, it beats getting out of it. So like I was talking about a little bit ago in terms of trying not to just completely ditch what you're doing, we're going to look at trying to build into your board, like different ways to invest into and around your board, to not hedge super far away, but instead to just grab things that might even be side grades, but that will allow you to have other combination pieces that suddenly bring it online or that allow you to move in other directions. So as you can kind of see from the board states that we had in this particular game, we started off on a just kind of conventional early game line where we were using clubs, but we decided to utilize our robe. We saw Showcase, and so we decided, okay, we might be able to get a shield play out of Showcase, grabbed it, and then started finding some fast weapon items, and then just decided to move into that direction. We saw Jim and just thought, well, that has some synergy with our current line. We'll grab Jim just so we could get some hit point scaling. It was just one of those items that we're grabbing to grab a little bit of power because it might synergize. And then because we did so much weapon cycling, Jim came online, suddenly it went onto our board. And then as we moved in that direction, we just started realizing that like the entire game became about the moment Jim hits, we can win. So let's get our weapons to start swinging immediately after Jim plays. And our board moved in that direction. Obviously, weapons do this a little bit better than a lot of other boards, but I think that it's still important to think about what is near where you are, and what investments like might be out of your way. So there's some rules of doing this. The basic rules of investment is local is better than distant, immediate is better than delayed, transitions are better than full pivots, and hedging is not insurance, is insurance, it's not investment. If like 50% of your stash space is being spent on investments, that's gambling. That's not insurance anymore. You should be grabbing just a couple of small hedges that are going to give you a backup plan should your current plan not work out for you. And this board is a really good example. I often see ladle in the early game and I just grab it. It goes in a lot of directions. It opens up a freeze line to me. It opens up like a extra burn activator for a matchbox line. I just find the card really flexible, so I tend to grab it. I'm in this state. I'm debating grabbing it. And chat talks about the cost of this investment. Like, it doesn't cost much to grab that ladle, but if I decided that I saw another freeze item that might go with this ladle, but it's something like a snow globe, and it's not necessarily powerful, that's just another thing I have to grab and hold that's going to take up stash space. If I saw a matchbox, I would have to then start getting activators. The amount of things that I would have to stack up in order for this hedge to actually pay off becomes pretty expensive. So asking how close is this to where I currently am? How many different steps do I have to take from here to there? How like immediate is the possibility that I'm going to get into this versus like how far? For example, we can see that kukri could go onto our board probably fairly immediately because it has immediate synergies. Whereas that ladle is probably some distance away. And then am I transitioning? Am I grabbing an item where I'll smoothly move? So if I have a matchbox and I'm grabbing a ladle, well, that works really well with my matchbox board. And now if I get a freeze activator, it's just more burn damage. So I can smoothly transition from the matchbox to the burn package to the freeze package. That would be a transition. And so is a much like more desirable type of hedge. Or am I grabbing that when I'm in a weapons board, in which case it obviously is more of a pivot. So one of the ways to help you think about this is this beautiful monstrosity made by Metal Phoenix. He has a video, I'm going to link it in the link below, where he goes over kind of all of the major pig archetype items, how they connect to each other, and like how you utilize them. Things like starting off with the weapon packages and how they connect, how things connect to meta items, etc. I strongly encourage you to watch the video. But the point that I want you to take away from the screenshot is that some items naturally have connections through other items to different lines. Some items are necessarily closer to each other than others in terms of their playability. So when you're thinking about how far something is in terms of a hedge, you want to find things that have direct lines on this particular graph, or things that are just immediately adjacent to each other. This is just a visualization that's going to help you think about if that thing is just a little bit too far away for you to consider right now. The next major lesson we learned is delaying decisions, being a healthy hoarder. It's really hard to do this, and we're definitely going to talk later on about how you do need to play around your mental state, and you can't constantly play perfectly. But we found so much value in delaying our decisions. We found that there's just so many different ways that you could get a little bit of tiny extra value by not selling anything in your stash until you're at the moment where you have to. My tree could upgrade in this instance, and suddenly those coins can gain value. I could show up the Val pack, and suddenly that bronze coin is worth more. I could see Barcoon or Midsworth, or my items might just get relative power by the new synergies that I find. This obviously happens with your weapon and damage items, but it can even happen with your scalers. Like I can suddenly find a loop, and then selling those coins suddenly gets more value. So waiting to the last possible minute to make a decision suddenly means that you're going to be able to find the most value and the most synergy from those decisions. On that same line is a slightly counterintuitive play, which is measure twice, cut once. If I have to make a decision, but I'm making the small one that's probably going to mean I have to make another decision later, it is probably best for me to just make the larger decision now. So in this case, we had a Lumbors. We weren't particularly wild about that Jabalian longbow. I could have sold it and bought Lumbors, but I know I'm weapon cycling for my Pig's chip. So if I do that, I'm still probably going to have to sell off my money tree as soon as I see a medium item that I want to buy. And also, I'm probably going to have to sell off that money tree considering how low of gold we're sitting on, just the very next weapon cycle we're coming to. So I could delay, sell the bow, grab the lumbors, which I did, which was a misplay, and then immediately find myself in the state where I am too low on money to do the reroll or too low on money to do the next weapon cycle, and then have to sell the tree. If I instead went the other way and grabbed the lumbors, we would have that bow on our board. We'd have it as an available option. Maybe we find a crook and suddenly we're just better positioned into Pig's Gym, etc. So if you have to make a decision and clear something off your board, look for the things that give you more space or more money as your primary options. And then just consider that as one of the things to balance against the items that you need more and need less. Every item can become a hedge. Just holding on to things suddenly means that those things have a decent amount more power. We had a Jabalian longbow that we got to cycle, and we didn't like it because we were running flail on our board, and we were having showcase, and we were pretty happy with that. But then suddenly, when we moved into the Pig's Gym package, we noticed that the timing of Pig's Gym was significantly important. It happened just before longbow, but it happened after flail, which meant flail was suddenly a terrible vehicle for it. The fact that we had all of these items sitting around and available meant that we were able to just switch over to that and suddenly get a bunch more power just because we hadn't sold the thing off yet. And so sitting on items until the last possible minute gives you this ability to kind of turn those items into power. We're looking at that hatchet, doesn't look particularly good, but if I happen to get another small item right now that has good timing with Jim and is a little bit stronger as a vehicle, I suddenly can get 3 items, 3 activations on my board guaranteed, that type of thing. So there just might be a play. Let's say I got Noisy Cricket as a skill, and then I suddenly want to have 2 small so that I can utilize that damage skill by having 7 items on my board. Those types of things are available to you if you just don't get rid of that item any earlier than you absolutely have to. Lastly, a board just isn't a board until the fight starts. We're assembling Voltron here, and Voltron doesn't put itself together until there's a fight to be had. I understand that is a deeply dated reference. I'm old, y'all. What are you going to do about it? This is an incredibly good example. In the very end of the game, we started moving quite a bit more quickly, and there were some really instructive misplays I learned because of it. I started selling off items on my board a little bit faster, and just making a little bit more space because I needed to hurry up and I didn't want to be bogged down by the decision. So as soon as I realized that Halady was a little bit faster and was therefore going to be an activator for our skill trigger, which was going to give everything haste, I knew I was going to always run it over running Ring King. I also knew that I was probably going to run Fang at some point over Halady. So those 2 items are staying, but Ring King wasn't. And because I decided to assemble my board then, I put Caltrops on, I decided this was the board, and I decided there was never going to be a reason to run Ring King, and I sold it off. I didn't need to. It was early. Then right before the fight, we see that we queued up against Pig, and suddenly Freeze comes to mind. And a great comment from one of my chatters was saying that had we still had 2 small weapons available to us, we would have 2 different things to catch as the freeze mechanic. And that we were already a 1-shot with we were incredibly close to 1-shot, if not a 2-shot with our Atlatl once this gym was going off, because this gym was outrageous. And so that was only 2 seconds we needed to kill them. Having Caltrops wasn't really doing too much for us if they happened to freeze us before the gym went off. And so just giving a better chance of gym not getting frozen by having 2 active items would have been the better play here. And I could have come up with that play myself, or my chat could have told me about it, and I could have actualized on it if I just didn't get rid of that item early. So just not deciding what your board is until the last minute, when now you have all of the information, like, oh, I'm up against Pig, freeze is a problem, is just going to give you that much more advantage. With that in mind, it's not luck, it's probability. It's very easy to see something bad happen and just be like, God, that's really unlucky. But the truth is, we have way more ability to influence this bad luck in this game than we think of. And this particular late game fight, this is a fight that we lost. We lost it specifically because he froze our pig's gym like an eighth of a second, like one tick before the thing went off. Seems deeply unlucky. However, we decided to run flail because it was it started immediately after gym, and we just liked that all three swings were happening after gym. But a decision we could have made was to have a little bit more gap between gym and those weapons, but run two weapons so we had less of a chance to get frozen. We know we're only running four active items and we're deeply like freeze vulnerable. And so there was not saying that we would have necessarily decided that was the best play because freeze isn't always a huge thing on Mac, but it was worth keeping in mind. We did have the ability to actually make a difference here. And as we're going to talk about a little bit later, there was a complete other thing that we could have done that might have saved us in this particular fight. So sweat the small stuff. If you look at my stash on this particular board state, you will see the first and only time, thankfully, in this game that I forgot to put Boomerang on my board before the PvE fight. Now, you can forget it all the time. I forget it all the time. But the reason why we keep trying to notice when we do it, keep trying to make those tiny plays, is because in this particular fight, had I gotten myself a feather or an insect wing, that would have been enough to get my gym below that freeze that happened on the last page. My gym would have gone off and I would have won that fight. This happened 2 days before that event. Had I remembered to run this one boomerang, I had like a 2 in 10 chance, a 1 in 5 chance of getting an item that would have won me that particular fight. So paying attention to those little details absolutely adds up. It's hard to keep doing, but it's worth paying attention to like every little bit of advantage you can get. So here we have an ode to misplaying. Misplaying is identifying your misplays is one of the best things you can do for yourself, not just because it like teaches you things, but it helps you regain your focus. It's easy to start like playing a little sloppy, and then when you're like, oop, that was a misplay, it's just a way to like shift your focus and get yourself back into it so that you don't make the misplays again. um in this particular example, we were focused on cycling. I started getting a little anxious because I had to go to the bathroom. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to go to the next board so chat can start discussing the next board. Go to the restroom, come back, and then I'll be able to read chat's response. So I don't have to wait for chat to respond. And of course, I didn't buy and sell those particular things that we've been cycling the whole game. There's a difference a lot of the time in fights where you're like, oh, I lost by 1 hit point. What a bummer. Or, oh my God, I won by 10 hit points. That's so lucky. That's the difference between this play. That's the 10 or 20 or 30 hit points that your pig's gym is getting you from that one cycle, right? So it's not luck, it's probabilities. And just that tiny 0.5% that you add here, add there is going to mean that you are going to consistently win more often than if you don't sweat the small stuff. As a final note on the ode to this particular misplay, it actually taught me like the biggest lesson that we have. This was the moment I kind of felt a little bad about myself. I went to the bathroom, I started processing, and then I realized why it was that I made this particular error, which brought us to the last lesson. Actually, no, sorry, not the last lesson, but the fifth lesson that we learned from this particular game, which is that self-knowledge is OP. The big thing that I realize is that like my misplays happen from a sense of impatience or a sense of frustration. I'm kind of doing the monotonous thing over and over and over again, and so I'm wanting to hurry up and get to the fun. Or more often for me, I see a big shiny decision I want to get to, and I kind of race past the one that I'm on in order to get there, and that's where my misplays start happening. I'll first start by trying to figure out who you're trying to be. Are you like trying to become a great player who 10 wins all the time? Are you trying to pull off cooler, better combos than what you're getting? Like you're seeing other people make these just amazingly awesome boards and you want to figure out how to get into them. Are you trying to like play more original cards and play lines that you haven't played as often? What's the thing that you feel a little sense of regret that you haven't been able to do as often in the game? That's the player that you're leaning towards. That's the person that you want to be. And then identify who you really are. Who's the person that you keep falling back to? So do you get bored of the try harding and you end up like going into the fun, tricky, fun, risky plays again? Do you give up on like the difficult to put together combos in favor of a safer line because you just know that it's going to win? Do you keep playing the same stuff over and over again because it wins more? Like, you understand the person that you're trying to be, and then you start identifying, well, who do I keep falling back into? And then once you have that, you want to identify like what are the states that are keeping you from getting there. So they're usually emotional states. It's usually fatigue, it's impatience, it's exhaustion, it's having watched Vampire Dooley stream. The regular things that are going to trigger a person into not being in like the mental state that they want to be, not being in a state of focus. Essentially, most of the time when you decide to stop playing towards the line you want to and start playing towards the time you're used to, it tends to come from a lack of focus, and the lack of focus usually comes from the one of these emotional triggers. So it's just good to kind of figure out the ones that lean on you the most, the states that are, and to be like, oh, that misplay came out of impatience, that misplay came out of excitement, I was really excited about making this decision, I raced past this other one. What are the emotional states you find yourself in when you just stop playing the game you want to play the game? And then once you identify those, just start playing around with ways that you can fiddle, you can tweak at the edges in order to get yourself to do the things you want to do just a little bit more. This is a video game. Let's not kill ourselves. Let's not try too much to try too hard. But at the same time, let's give ourselves a chance to play the game that we find fun. And a lot of times that's the way we want to play the game, not the way we feel like we kind of have to because this way is winning or that way becomes too monotonous or whatever. Let's give ourselves the chance to play those things that we're a little bit more interested in by setting up some just ways to work around ourselves. So little things like having a fidget spinner in your hand to like split your attention in moments where you are overthinking. So you could start playing with it, especially during the fights, etc. It's a grounding tool. It's something that's going to get you out of your head and make you stop feeling the tension of like the perpetual gameplay of you perpetually focusing. Obviously, just getting up and taking a walk or just taking a breather, go getting a Coke, something like that, is a good way to just like break up the gameplay so that you can get back to focus. And then the one that works really well for me is trying to alternate my tempo. So trying to find times where I can play a little bit faster and then times where I want to slow down. Oh, I see that decision. Here we go. Let's start slowing down. Is a good way to like just allow yourself to enjoy the game, but also to spend a little bit more time in the areas that you are having fun. The last thing that came out of the game was just a lot of side discussions that we had about particular builds themselves and why they were powerful. And so I leave this here because I think this is a way for you to perpetually learn from the game without having somebody kind of identify the lessons for you. The best way to do it is to just identify builds that you're playing a lot or that you find powerful and ask what is the gameplay loop of that build. That build is powerful almost always for a couple reasons. One, the card is just mechanically strong, but two, it enforces a gameplay loop that is just good play. So, some examples of this. Freeze boards teach you how to do that kind of circular hedging we were talking about, buying items that are really close to your current build as hedges instead of going out of your way. You just kind of intuitively know when you're playing a freeze board that luge that you're not going to run right now might end up working out later when it fits with another piece. And these boards just kind of lend themselves to you constantly gathering and collecting and hoarding items that might shift your board around. It teaches you that thing we are talking about you not actually having a board, you're just having pieces, and the board gets assembled at the very end of the game. So part of the reason the build is so strong is because it forces you to do that consistent incremental upgrade of power and to keep holding items that may be utilized and get new synergies and become powerful later on. Crook is a really good example of teaching you progressive upgrading. So starting with it Lotl, you kind of know the mini game you're playing is to get to 180. The moment you finish it Lotl, you're starting to look as upgrade pieces as a way to like progress your board. So you're looking for your caltrops, you're looking for your lion cane, you're looking for your belt or phonograph. And then once you're in that board, you're like, all right, now maybe I could start leaning towards an apocalypse pig, and you're putting together your Atlas stone, you're fishing for things like rivet gun or fishing for your pendulum. Crook is just such a good build about, okay, I got here, let's go on to the next one. It teaches you the moment you've kind of stabilized that you need to put your focus forward, figure out what the next line is. And then because of that, it very instructively tells you where you need to spend your time, either encounters, going shopping, etc. Because you know, all right, I got it lottled to 180. Now the new game is finding those caltrops, finding that lion cane. I'm going to shift from encounters over to shopping, etc. And drum is a really good example of a board that teaches you how to greed. You already have your win condition in sight as soon as you get drum for the most part. And that means that you're able to like not worry too much about finding a win condition or putting together a win condition. Instead, you get to just try to figure out how to make this one thing that you have as strong as absolutely possible. You'll skip XP sometimes to go to the lesser monster fights. That's not as much the case now, but occasionally you'll skip a diamond monster something to go to the lesser fights, to try to pick up a fast weapon like a Fang. You will do a lot more mandala re-rolling to try to get your yo-yos, etc. One of the things it teaches is that once you see the horizon, once you see what the end state of your build looks like, greed becomes much more powerful as a long-term endeavor. So those are just some general examples of different types of boards and what they teach you. Almost every single board in the game that's powerful has its own kind of concentrated game loop that when you start playing it more, you start realizing you do this different style of play a little bit more often. And that's because that style of play has times where it becomes a win condition. So always look at the powerful lines that you're doing, what they're driving you to do in terms of play. And then you could use that as a learning lesson for things that are just generically powerful plays in the Bazaar. And that's it. That is the 6 major tips that we got out of playing a monstrous 5-hour game. Hopefully this was a slightly easier way to consume it than spending that much time watching it yourselves. Hopefully there were some lessons there that you learned. I down below in the description have the link for you for that amazing Metal Phoenix video. I really encourage you to go watch it. It is just an amazing way to get your brain around how to flow between the various states of Pyg. I can't recommend it enough. Also in the description below, as always, is the link to our Pyg Academy study guide, which is a giant spreadsheet of everything we think you might need to know to play Pyg a little bit better. So please check those out, and thank you so much for watching. I hope it was useful, and as always, remember, friends don't let friends watch Vampire Dueling.